Sure, yeah. So this is our March Madness 80s hair band ultimate smackdown of albums. And each of us has gone through and picked, uh, according to the brackets that we've got set up, some winners and some losers. We're going to talk about which ones we've picked and why, and comment along the way of what it was like listening to 16 hair metal albums in a very short amount of time, and how much fun that was or wasn't. So I don't know. Anything else you guys want to mention off the top before we dive in?
What's your name and what do you do in the band?
Christopher, keyboards, singing, songwriting. Yeah.
Who are you,
That's
Jorg?
me.
Jorg plays second fiddle or guitar.
Git fiddle.
Git fiddle.
Slide fiddle.
The slide fiddle.
Yeah, I'm Jeff McClellan. I guess sort of lead singer, guitar player, songwriter as well. Yeah. So I listened to a lot of this music when I was a kid. So I remembered most of the songs actually. So I'm very opinionated when it comes to 80s hair metal. So let's roll.
You're the
one. Yes. That's why I don't get invited to parties.
Yep.
Yep. All right, unless you guys are there, so I have someone to hang out with.
Do we want to kind of do this in some kind of order for each
do like?
Why don't we do the really lopsided ones? We'll do the first to 15. Get those ones kind of out of the way because there's a few in the middle there. I think we'll have a little bit more discussion over.
Yeah.
There's a few that I don't like their chances, so maybe we'll start there.
Yeah. So speaking of, the first one is like number 1 seed and number 16 seed. If we go it that way, then that one was Van Halen, 1984, versus Out of the Cellar by Rat. So I've listened to 1984 a million times.
By choice?
Yes, by choice. I've not listened to this Rat album actually until we went back and listened to it.
No love for Warren D. Martini. But anyway. Sorry, that's the guitar player of Rat. Sorry.
Did not know that.
Yeah, there you go.
Lead guitar player.
Lead guitar. Stephen Pearcy. I find this one ironic because I don't think it's a big secret. I'm going to pick Van Halen, but I think I owned 4 Rat tapes in the 80s. One of them was Out of the Cellar. I didn't own 1984 because I was 9 years old when that album, 8 or 9 probably, so I was pretty young. I remember it in the time. My greatest memory of that is playing street hockey and just down the street on Greystone Drive, probably Goble Drive in Spruce Grove, and some like cool teenager was blasting Jump out of his car while we were playing street hockey. And I thought it was the greatest piece of music ever constructed. I remember that impression on me. It was like, holy crap, this is so cool. But for me to go out and buy it and to own it, it was sort of through my brothers that I always got my Van Halen connection because my older brothers, especially my oldest brother Bruce, always seemed to have Van Halen in his collection. So I would sneak it out of his tape collection and take a listen while I was to interrupt my repeated Rat listens in my own room. Yeah. Anyway, Jorg, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I remember hearing both of these bands in the early mid '80s, I guess. Van Halen, we're all similar age. I thought Van was his first name. I remember that.
Right.
So, and that he was
Van Morrison's cousin.
Blonde-haired singer. So I guess David Lee Roth is who I assumed was Van Halen, or Halen, Van. And well, I listened to both of these albums, and I know we don't agree on this. The Rat album went on my list of not as bad as I thought it would be.
Me too. Yep.
Their singles really strong, Round and Round.
It has a hit. There's no question. A discernible.
Yeah,
hit.
and it's a strong hit. It might be outside of Van Halen, and maybe some others. I don't know. might be the strongest hit, actually.
And has actually
But
lived on. People know that song. Like that's still
Mhm.
Round and Round is on every like playlist of 80s. Like it's a pretty quintessential track of that time, I would say.
Yeah.
To their credit. Yeah. Sorry.
But overall, I mean, the album is, it's got a lot of the same kind of dynamic. This is the no power ballad bracket, which was actually nice. But
Right.
It could have used the power ballad.
but neither Rat or 1984 have a power ballad. Maybe the closest to power ballad is the I'll Wait, right?
I'll Wait is probably as close as you get the synthy one. So,
yeah. But I mean, I was like, that was pretty good. I'll listen to 1984, even though I've heard it a million times. And then it was just immediate. Like, oh yeah, that's a great album.
It's a greatest hits album. It's ridiculously like, and even really the last two tracks are sort of average on 1984. I've always thought House of Pain and I can't remember the other one. That when you compare them to Panama and Jump and Drop Dead Legs, and you just go down the list of all these amazing classic Hot for Teacher, but those songs are so strong. I mean, and they're just as strong today.
This last time I really liked Top Jimmy too.
Top Jimmy is a great
Top
song.
Jimmy's great.
Yeah. And it's got the deep cuts, right? Like Top Jimmy and Drop Dead Legs would probably be considered deep cuts, and both those songs are just the guitar riff in Drop Dead Legs is one of my favorite guitar riffs ever written. Yeah. Eddie's rhythm playing, everyone talks about the solos and stuff, but he is a rock solid, like one of the great rhythm guitar players of all time and one of the great riff writers of all time. When you compare it to Rat, when it's like like every song just pedaling on E and doing power chords, Eddie's doing alternate tunings and harmonic riffs and so creative, and I mean he's a genius, and Warren DeMartini is a decent 80s metal guitar player. So it's a pretty tough comparison.
He's better.
And I found it funny too when I listened to Round and Round, which is the best track, I would say. Catchy song. I've listened to that song. Like I get a good charge out of that song still. But the catchiest part of the song, they go down and it's an arpeggio right before the chorus kicks in. And it's a little derivative of Panama when he does the harmonic little thing right before the chorus kicks in. So it seemed like there's a lot of influence there as well when I list those two tracks. I think Warren DeMartini probably listened to a few Van Halen albums in his day. So, yeah.
What's great about Rat, though, that none of these other bands have on this list is that Jake E. Lee was the first guitar player.
He was. Got him in there, Jorg.
How long did that take? It was like, 10 minutes?
Anyone watching this won't get the inside joke, but Jorg and I are a little too obsessed with Jake E. Lee and his band that followed his Ozzy days. Badlands, which sadly was post the 88 cutoff, so we couldn't put him on the list. But yes, you're right. Jake E. Lee is a god. I would probably have voted for Rat if Jake E. Lee had still been with the band.
Probably.
He was touring Sweden with Ozzy at that point or something, I think. So,
Chris?
I'll say one more thing, I guess. When I think of the whole genre of hair metal, really, I think Van Halen invented it. They didn't mean to, probably. They were 70s rockers, and they were doing their thing, and they tried to sort of jazz it up. And you think of some of the flamboyant acts of the 70s, even more sort of serious artists like David Bowie and stuff, and trying to sort of emulate that and bring that into that sort of fun California party rock. And I think 1984 is their best. It is their best album of the 80s, of one of the great bands. Like, you look, I'm not here to diss Van Hagar because I love Sammy Hagar stuff too. But 1984 is their best album of the 1980s. So it's pretty tough to argue with that. Yeah. So, sorry, daughter, making lunches.
Rockstar life.
Oh yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah. The Rat one.
Yeah. Any more Rat thoughts? Go ahead.
Rat thoughts was likewise better than I was expecting to be. I only knew the single. I didn't know any of the rest of it. And maybe it was because of the order in which I listened to the songs in the playlist, where I was getting really tired of some of the other ones, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But once it got to Rat, I'm like, okay, this is good. I would come back and listen to this again.
They were a huge band, big time production.
Yeah.
If you ever seen the Sound City documentary, they recorded in that studio.
Oh, did they?
And they had a bunch of interviews. Like they were part of that package at that time. There was some big money behind them. So, some
Yeah.
serious production value and stuff. So
You know what I liked was the attitude of the singer. He had kind of a snotty kind of
Stephen
sound.
Pearcy.
Stephen Pearcy.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Kind of.
I think I had
It
his poster.
has a kind of an attitude, which I kind of liked. You know, like
He has a
Sure.
cool rock voice, but I think he's a bit like a David Lee Roth. He's kind of a
Yeah.
one-trick pony, but he just
Yeah.
doesn't have. Dave's got so much more charisma,
yeah,
right?
Oh,
And so, I think a lot of these bands you see they're all sort of knockoffs of Van Halen in their own way, and I think Rat is another one of those.
For sure.
Yeah.
For
All right.
1984 keyboard player, like that was pretty huge for me. But I actually got the album later, like you guys. I think I remember Jump because they used it as the theme song for Video Hits with Samantha Taylor on CBC.
Yeah.
So I'd tune in and watch Video Hits every time.
Yeah.
And that was the song that they played. So I loved that. But it wasn't until later when I joined Columbia House tapes that I got like the set of 1984, 5150, 0812 is like
Yeah.
my
Great
Van
album.
Halen deep dive or whatever. But
Yeah. And as far as the synthy bands go in the 80s, I think Van Halen did it the best,
Very frizzy.
honestly. We'll talk about some of the other ones. Being a guitar player, I don't know, synth would never drew me to an album. But Eddie, he's just a master at everything. So
Europe is on this list.
yeah, we're gonna get to some other synth. Chris and I are gonna fight later, but that's okay. Anyway, can we make the obvious choice here? I chose Van Halen, and I'm assuming that's all the way around the band there.
Van Halen, yeah.
All right,
We're doing Robert's rules. I have a motion for mention before.
let's move on here. Sure. What was the next one? I don't have it in front of me.
Well, if we go 215, then the next one is Def Leppard, Pyromania
Ooh.
versus Wasp, Inside the Electric Circus.
All right,
Which,
tough call.
to me, I think Wasp was overachieving at 15 almost, but
Yeah, there's a couple on here we could have swapped out with other bands, and other bands I far prefer to these bands. But it is, it's kind of fun to be forced to listen to something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I think out of all of the albums I listened to, the Wasp one was probably my least favorite of them all. That was the hardest one for me to get through. And this song, even though it was a B-side at the end, but Douchebag Blues is probably the worst song I've heard in years. I hadn't heard that one, and
so we're gonna cover it, is what you're saying, right? We're gonna resurrect Douchebag Blues.
We could do a medley of apolitical blues and Douchebag Blues and like meld them together or something.
I'm assuming Douchebag Blues was probably autobiographical about Blackie Lawless. He's probably the douchebag.
No, he's talking about like his sister and anyway, that was really painful for me to listen to.
Yeah.
I know not as much of Def Leppard fans as me. That was like my big thing of the 80s was Def Leppard, and Pyromania was like that's their masterpiece, and I will readily go back and listen to that one at any time. Went back and listened to it this time and still really like it. Still enjoy it. It sounds a bit dated, like everything on this list, but I still really enjoyed that album. So.
For sure.
We have a technical problem, Chris. You're frozen.
Is my camera toast? Oh, there we are.
You're back.
I'm back.
You're back.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll go. I'll admit I never heard this album. Wasp was one of those bands that scared the crap out of me when I was a little kid, because you think of that early 80s. The one thing that was missing a little bit, like some of the early 80s stuff, but I think of like the Iron Maidens of the world and stuff, where it's like, are they hair metal bands? And they were the biggest bands of that time, Does Somewhere in Time or something belong on this album? Peace of Mind or something? And I would, the great albums to go back to. And Wasp was always also ran of that era of music for me, like sort of that little bit of Satanist kind of imagery, and trying to be like, I remember the video Blackie Lawless with the bat wings and the saw blades on his arms and trying to be all bad, and I don't think his parents gave him the name he has, Blackie Lawless. I think he probably manufactured that. So I never really, a couple of early tracks, they did a terrible cover of The Real Me by The Who, which will insult me till I die. So I've never forgiven them for that. That insults me more than Motley Crue's Helter Skelter. So, so although listening to it, overall, I found the production was big, and it's sort of snarling, darker heavy metal album. There's a lot of poppy stuff on the list here. We have the Bon Jovis and such. So it had a more of an edge to it. As I was listening to it, it sounded to me like a Kiss album with no Paul Stanley songs. It was all Gene, just growling and like bad innuendos and stuff, and just being kind of a douchebag. And that's sort of what it sounded like to me. So I'll likely never listen to that album again, as my daughter turned it off in the truck because she's like, "We're not listening to this," is what she told me. On the flip side of that, which was probably best, I think it's child abuse to force your children to listen to Wasp. Pyromania is one of those, like, what do you say about Pyromania? Def Leppard is the top of the heap, and I think as we get down to the final four, I think they'll probably still be there. For me, there's always the two big albums. You have Pyromania and Hysteria, sort of the later one, and the glossy production, and both Mutt Lange productions, but Mutt learned a few more tricks before he got to Hysteria, I think. And as a kid, Hysteria was the album for me because it fit into my age bracket. Pyromania I was pretty young again when that album came out, but you can't argue that hit after hit after hit. Amazing. I actually like the production better. It's a real rock album, whereas Hysteria is more of a pop album. Partly because, obviously when they moved to electronic drums with the accident, obviously those change a lot of parameters. I recently watched the Def Leppard classic albums on Hysteria, and just talking about the uncertainty of that time. You sort of make fun of these times, but these are all like brothers in arms and guys that grew up together and joined in bands, and then you have this near-death accident and a horrific amputation. And to their credit, they didn't kick them out of the band. They kept them there, made it work, made them poppier because they just had to rely on other things. But they're sort of like, to me, they're one without the other seems odd. Like they're sort of yin and yang to one another. Pyromania still has a little bit of that edgy rock, live drums. The guitars are a little, like, you can hear them. There's not layered as much. You can really hear the riffs coming through. Rock of Ages is probably top 5 song of the 80s. Like, it's a great rock song. I still have visions of doing lip sync battles at Woodhaven Junior High in drama class, and every video I was in, like it was group projects, but somehow I got into every single one. I'd be playing bass in one, drums in another. And Mr. Ryan was a beauty teacher that time. He showed us old sort of exemplars. And so all the exemplars came from the Pyromania age. And there was these cool, like, early, like, 80s rock chicks that I totally had crushes on, singing Foolin' and just laying into the fuzz on Foolin'. I can still see that, man. Like, Def Leppard was the shit in the 80s. And it's probably their coolest album for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Parkland Village, and Wasp was kind of a thing in the trailer park that I grew up in. A lot of the older headbangers really looked up to Blackie Lawless, and
dressed like him.
Well, are we swearing on this?
What's the you want to say F like a beast, don't you?
Yeah, well, I remember that was like the local headbanger that lived up the street from me. It was like, hey, come over and check out what my aunt sent me from England. Get an import of Fuck Like a Beast, which, if you've never seen the album cover, it's
subtle.
It's subtle.
Okay. Pastels.
All of these, probably all of these albums have probably problems with sexism, so we can probably just not talk.
Yeah. This genre can't exist anymore. Like, it's just it's so misogynistic. The whole.
So that album cover is what I'm getting at. Is like, it's pretty problematic.
What's wrong with being sexy?
Yes.
This is the Spinal Tap list.
This is why Spinal Tap worked.
That being said, I'm with Jeff. I had never heard this album. I think by 1986, I had graduated from caring about the older headbangers because I think I was in the dominant headbanger age, which was 11. But so yeah, Blackie Lawless was kind of scary and kind of threatening, and I didn't remember these songs at all. When I listened to it, the one that kind of stuck out is, well, a couple of them. I Don't Need No Doctor is a cover by Humble Pie.
Oh, I missed that.
And this has kind of a 70s vibe a little bit, this album. But the Def Leppard one, you guys know, I think you know, that it's not my favorite. I don't love Def Leppard. I don't know. It's nothing about them per se. It was just sort of kind of when this sort of thing was happening, I was definitely more in the Judas Priest, Iron Maiden kind of heavy metal scene. But this, when I listen to it, it's got a lot of really hooky songs. And Photograph, I think, you mentioned Rock of Ages, but Photograph, every time that comes on, that's a strutting song. That's a do your Jimmy Page face.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the strength of that song alone, to me, I mean,
Santana even covers Photograph, so I don't know what that tells you.
I don't know why I need to put Pyromania against anything on this bracket, because it's Wasp. but I think that, to me, that's pretty obvious. I'm looking forward to seeing if we disagree on any of these, but
yeah,
Pyromania
later.
Yeah. These are some of those albums that, I mean, there's other bands of that era that could have easily been interchanged with them. Yeah. But it does provide a better conversation. It's not just like something you've heard a million times and we're all going to agree on. So, yep. Yeah. I think we can all agree. Def Leppard, right?
Pyromania.
Actually, and Pyromania, I believe, was the #2 selling album that year, second only to Thriller. In the world. So, wow. I remember that stat when I was a kid. I don't know. I spent way too much time watching much music, but yeah, it was. They were such a phenomenon at that time. So, cool. Let's move on.
Cool. So, 3 and 14 were GNR, Appetite for Destruction, versus Vixen. Their debut album.
This is going to be a long
self-titled
conversation. Can I start?
You can start.
I think I ended up getting Vixen on this list just to add some variety in the day we were sort of listing bands. Definitely a band, we could have switched out. It's no secret I love Tesla, and Tesla's first album could have easily fit onto this list. And then I could have sat here and whined about why nobody loves Tesla as much as I do. But I always found Vixen kind of a curious band of that time. I even did a little research because I didn't know much about them. Listening to the album, it's super poppy, very synthy. It looks like a hair metal album. It certainly has the trappings of that. It's a pretty candy coated sort of production. But I still, to their credit, the lead single, "Edge of a Broken Heart," I could sing that before I listened to the album today. I could still remember the chorus, and I haven't heard that since 1988 or whenever this came out. So, Jorg, we lost your camera too.
Nope, you're back.
So I mean, there are decent songs on there. Honestly, the songs are fine. Lots of just kind of mid '80s. The synths are overriding the guitars a little bit, and I think that might have been a product of just trying to package a female band, and in such a misogynistic era of music, it sort of was what it was. This band, though, I looked up, they were together since 1980. They paid the dues. This wasn't some fabrication of a record company. They wrote the songs and played the shows and did all the work. So that's awesome. From the outside, I would have assumed it was some kind of devious plan by a record company to try to package a girl band that would look like all sort of Bon Jovi girls or sort of thing, right? So, I mean, the songs were fine. I just found it really vanilla and kind of boring. So it's not something I'll certainly ever listen to again, but I always sort of have a memory of that time. So to their credit, it's not the worst thing I've ever listened to. On the flip side of that, Holy, what a pairing. Axl Rose and Vixen. I didn't re-listen to GNR because I know that album very well. I am always hit and miss with GNR. I highly respect the band. I totally understand their place. Even at the time, I was hit and miss with them. And as a guitar player, you know, I was always more of an Izzy guy than a Slash guy. I don't know what that is. Slash is an amazing guitar player. He's awesome. They're an amazing band. They deserve all the accolades they get. Appetite for Destruction is a really amazingly solid rock and roll album. There are lyrics that still make me cringe on here, though. There are times if it's playing in the truck, I skip tracks because I just don't want my kids to hear how fucking crazy he is and these types of things. I love Rocket Queen, but you know, the bridge has some interesting sound, ambient sounds in there. You got to watch that with the kids too. But I love the song. When I listen to that album, I mean, just Welcome to the Jungle is almost like bigger than a song now, and it still totally works. Like, it's a really amazing, huge rock song. My favorite GNR track has always probably been Paradise City. I think it encapsulates the place it came from. It's huge and long, but it's still got sort of a bit of a 70s classic rock vibe to it. They always had a little bit more of a bluesy authenticity to them than a lot of the other bands. There's never any tapping solos or guitar-many or these types of things. They were more of a Rolling Stones, right? Than Yes, or, you know, trying to sort of be a little proggy in it, to their credit. I joked that I think 1984 and Van Halen sort of invented the genre and perfected the genre, and I've always thought that Appetite for Destruction kind of slammed the door at the end of it. They're sort of bookends to one another, because even though they kept going on, and if we'd done the after 88 albums and the Extremes of the world and these other bands that were hugely popular and of that era with lots of talented people, I don't think anyone ever eclipsed the effect of Appetite for Destruction, including GNR. They never ever got back up that hill, and they paved the way for Nirvana to come and mock them on the MTV Awards, and have all the little jabs they had at each other. So I'd pick Appetite for Destruction every day of the week, even though there's tracks I will skip, and but there's so much variety, and it's a great rock album. So I'll shut up.
Yeah.
It's rare.
What?
Izzy,
But
where
not
is
for
Izzy?
long. Yeah. I'll say the Vixen album surprised me. I knew the single as well. I didn't know the single was written by Richard Marx. So that was new.
There you go. I didn't pick that up today.
But even the rest of it, yeah.
I take it back. They win.
It kind of surprised me. I liked it more than I thought I was going to. And the playing on it is better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Style,
they're legit.
leans more toward that, like all the albums that would have come out in 1989 that we sort of left out. This is the album that was most like all of that. I feel.
Yeah, for sure.
But I enjoyed listening to that one a lot more than I thought I was going to. So there's that. Appetite for Destruction. I probably enjoyed re-listening to it less than I thought I was going to. I listened to it a lot when it came out. I had the cassette, and it was a big deal. And yeah, maybe, you know, my tastes are just too pop or something, but it was sort of like by reputation alone and by the sort of monument status of that album, it slam dunk wins, of course. It should go through, but didn't really enjoy going back and listening to it all the way through.
There's some rough
because
tracks
it is
on there.
sort of
It's hit and miss.
And,
I find it hit and miss all the way through. When it hits, it hits. But when it misses, it's like...
Yeah. Which, debut album, fine. Like, it doesn't all have to be... You know, 1984 wasn't Van Halen's debut, although Van Halen's debut was freaking amazing. Their debut... They're not all going to be awesome, but just some of the off moments are really cringy for me, and then the really awesome moments are really awesome. But
yeah,
it's one of those ones where I thought I was going to enjoy listening to Appetite more than I did when I went back and listened to it. It was sort of like, oh yeah, I remember I always fast forwarded through the song because it's really
it's funny how I'm more familiar with it, right? So
Yeah.
It's not as shocking. I'm like, yeah, this is a good song. I always skip this one. So I know what Jorg's gonna say. Take it away, Jorg. Here's your moment.
You know
What are you
what I'm
gonna
gonna
say,
say?
Jorg? You're gonna tell me that you saw a band in 1987.
Oh yeah.
Open for a band. Come on, do it.
I
Hold it over my head some more, buddy.
yeah.
I saw Skid Row in 1987 9 times. Open for no. Go ahead.
One of the benefits of growing up in a rock and roll family is I've seen a lot of bands in their classic era. Kind of when I was too young to understand how cool that was, but I saw the Izzy Stradlin era of Guns N' Roses, and they opened
There it is
for Iron Maiden on Seventh Son of a Seventh Son tour.
Mm.
And
I had Izzy Stradlin and the Juju Hounds solo album, just so you know. I just throwing that out there.
It
was pretty good, actually. Yeah,
I think a lot of people walked out of there. I mean, I was in those days. You had to have a camp, you had a team, and I wasn't budging. I was Team Maiden, but I think a lot of people walked out of there going like not sure who they had like your 45-minute set or whatever it was in those days, and people walked out of there not sure what the better show was, which I've never seen in like a big arena show. Usually the opener is just kind of there.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say never, but yeah, and it was undeniable. And I remember wanting to resist Guns N' Roses at that time. Just I don't know, because I'm oppositional. It's part of my nature.
Totally.
And well, by that I mean I just want to disagree, but it doesn't mean I'm an extroverted whatever. But it was undeniable, right? It was like, yeah, this is pure rock and roll. But if you listen to it, there's some cringy moments because it's 2021, right? I think that's the big thing when you listen to Appetite. You're like, ooh, that's not okay. You know, there's that.
Yeah.
I compare it to, I mean, comparison to me is obvious, but say Rolling Stones, and if you imagine the Let It Bleed album, where to me that's maybe the best Stones album or one of them. And it's shocking what they're singing about in that Let It Bleed album. And it's also fascinating because it's just reporting how decadent their lifestyle was.
Yeah.
And I get that from this Appetite for Destruction. It's like, it's awful, but it's also fascinating, you know, because it's instead of it being brazen and showing off like I think Black Lawless probably was, it's just you get the feeling of like, oh, I'm just talking about my life, which makes it more shocking, right?
Yeah, there's an authenticity to it. Like that's what they dealt with, right? So that's always more interesting to me as well. I can agree with that.
Yeah.
So,
I wasn't familiar with Vixen at all, and you know, it was a listen kind of as I was doing things because a lot of these were because you know, it was cramming. And you know, the hit was hit worthy, or at least, you know, it sounded like a single. And then nothing really stuck at all. Like I'm hard pressed to kind of remember what all I listened to. And I was kind of wanted this to be a better album. I just hoped it was, you know, because I don't really like to say, you know, Axl Rose clearly is the superior one here, but that album
is pretty talented guy.
That album is just is undeniable. It's one of 3, I think, on your list here, on this list, that to me is undeniable.
It's a shoe-in for the next round.
Yeah.
It's Team Canada at the Olympics.
Yeah.
And Vixen's like
Belarus.
South
Korea. Or Germany.
Germany. It's one of those games you feel you should watch because you're a Canadian, but and you feel bad. You want to argue for the little guy. Oh, that guy, you know, their frontline center played 4th line minutes in the dub. Like, you know, you're hoping for him, but it's not going to happen. So, I think it's a slam dunk.
So, GNR.
All right.
All the way.
Now we might get a few. There's going to be some in the middle here we're not going to agree on. I know that for sure.
Probably. Or maybe. Well, I don't know. We'll see.
All right.
So,
let's bring it
number
on.
4 was Motley Crüe, Shout at the Devil. Number 13, Love It for Sting, Scorpions.
Okay, the German
going
element.
International with this one. It's outside of LA.
Yeah. It is a good point, your last one, Jorg, just about it was all within that Sunset Strip kind of sort of life. Like all those guys lived that. It's hard to imagine that. I think the decadence of that. So a lot of these Motley Crüe, obviously, I think lends itself really well to that discussion as well. Who wants to go first here?
I think I know which two where people are leaning. So I'm gonna start where I had the mindset to like, listen to this Motley Crüe album, ugh, and I was sort of, I don't know if pleasantly surprised is the right word. I was surprised that it was okay. The tone is awful. Like it's just that really same kind of guitar tone. I didn't remember that there was a guitarmony like kind of
the
like
solo.
That solo. I didn't remember that at all.
Yeah, that shocked me too.
Obviously, Shout at the Devil is memorable, and Looks That Kill, which is to me almost
that hits, man.
The video is almost like Lick It Up, isn't it? I didn't watch it.
It is, yeah. They're in sort of that. They're underground somewhere.
And Helter Skelter, not so much. But what was the song? I can't think of it. But there was another catchy song on here. It reminded me of Too Fast to Love, which is not on
Too Young to Fall in Love.
Yeah.
Too Young to Fall in Love. Those are the singles.
Yeah. So I mean, they stuck out to me as being good. The tone was like really abrasive. I didn't like that. It could have just been like earlier in their career. Maybe it just suffered from bad production. I don't know. So I didn't like how the album sounded. And have you ever looked at Scorpions album covers? I was that was the Scorpions. Love at First Sting. I don't know.
I don't know if there's a theme.
I wanted to because of my heritage to cheer for the Scorpions, but I just don't dig it. It's Rock You Like a Hurricane. I don't know. It's just too cheesy. I think Scorpions are pretty high on the cheese.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I went with Crüe. Didn't think I would, but I did.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go. I listened to the Motley Crüe album first. I've always never owned a tape by Motley Crüe. It's funny to live through that era. I just could always kind of listen to singles. My biggest memory of Motley Crüe is when the only reason I've ever seen them live is I got my buddy, his company owned a luxury box, and he called me up and said, "Hey, you want to go to Motley Crüe?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's go."
Yeah.
I knew every song. Like, they played one obligatory sort of like the new track that nobody knew, and the rest, it's like I knew the lyrics, I knew everything. I was like, wow. And they do put on a great rock show. It's over the top, and parts of it are marginally disgusting, and old women sort of lifting their tops for Tommy and these types of things, and that's just the Motley Crüe vibe. And I'm sure if you've seen the movie, they celebrate that, and that's the lifestyle of Motley Crüe. Musically, I always liked a few tracks growing up. This was a pretty early. I was in elementary school when this album came out. I'm a huge Beatles fan now, and the irony is the first time I ever heard Helter Skelter was this version off of this album. I didn't know what that was. I'm sure I've said the story before, but I had a version of that song because our librarian at Brookwood Elementary School in Spruce Grove was Mrs. Stelter. And so I'd walk around the schoolyard going, "Help Mrs. Stelter! Help Mrs. Stelter!" And I thought that was brilliant. It's probably the first joke I was proud of my whole life, and I can thank Motley Crüe for that. So, overall, I mean, it's got the creepy voiceover intro, sort of, is this a concept album? I don't know. Shout at the Devil's got to its credit, it's like a live show. Like, they're like, we're going to open with a chant that's going to get the audience going, right? And they sort of understood how to do that. It's a catchy, you have to listen to Vince screech. He's not the best singer, but he is what he is. He's at his prime here, to his credit. His voice sort of fit that sort of like nasally high, screechy kind of thing. I certainly hear them now. It's pretty rough, and it's tough to judge guys that are well in their 60s trying to sound like they did when in their 20s. But Looks to Kill's that's a catchy song. To Nikki Sixx's credit, he writes some catchy guitar riffs. I find the deep cuts are painful though. Like there's such a drop off from singles to deep cuts on Motley Crue albums where I'm just like, it's almost like it's not the same band. Like you could, to their credit, I think they knew it's like we need 3 like knock it out of the park singles on this album, and the rest doesn't really matter. Throw a cover in there, slap some other riffs together and get it in. But Show the Devil, Looks to Kill, and Too Young to Fall in Love are pop songs, man. They're really, really catchy songs. So it is what it is. The Scorpions, yeah, I'll admit I find Rock You Like a Hurricane, it gets me rocking like a hurricane a little bit. It sounds like a fun rock band, and the lyrics are so stupid though. Like I just, like when you sit back, it's like Rock You Like a Hurricane? Like, okay. It seems like an odd title, but it kind of works. It reminds me of sort of like that, as a Canadian, hearing Helix for the first time, and I was giving them an R and an O and a C, like just getting into that sort of vibe. And the Scorpions always kind of sound like that to me. So that track works. The rest of the album's pretty boring. There's the one other single, I can't remember what it is, but overall, it's not a great listen. I have memory. There's Scorpion songs I could still listen to. I can listen to Rock You Like a Hurricane. I can listen to Winds of Change. I can listen to some of those songs. They don't really bother me. But in the grand scheme of this exercise, I don't think knocking Motley Crue out in the first round would be of an insult, because they are, even though they were never my favorites, they're one of the quintessential hair metal bands. So I definitely got to give it to them for Show the Devil.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't expect much from the Motley album, and it met expectation. It was like, I own Girls, Girls, Girls on tape and didn't really like it. I owned Dr. Feelgood and really liked that one.
Yeah, that's their best album. I don't think there's any question about that.
This one, but that was in '89 or whatever, so I think it was past the cutoff. But this one was exactly what I was thinking it was going to be, the sound of it and the style of the songs and stuff like that. So the singles were good, and yeah, I found it really kind of a hard slog to listen to the album tracks on this one. But not terrible. It wasn't like super bad or anything. I liked it more than Wasp. But
yeah,
yeah, it was not. It was kind of a slog for me to listen to that one. I was wondering what it would, if I felt the same if they had recorded it in a awesome studio with really good production and stuff. If the sound of the album was so grating that was kind of what was putting me off a little bit. But I think it's just overall, like the other tracks on the album that were just sort of not meeting what I normally like. But I did like what they did later on, just maybe not this particular album. Scorpions,
there was such a live thing, huge live.
Yeah,
thing.
well,
the big show. Right?
I think for almost all of these bands, when you're listening to them, it's like you have to picture them on a stage with like a big crowd of headbangers, and you got the fire and everything. All of these songs are meant for that venue, and in that venue is really exciting and stuff. The fact that the songs are really good, maybe it's important, maybe it's not. And so with this one, listening to Motley, that's what I was thinking was, if you were in a club and they were on stage and there's all this energy and there's pyro and everything,
shout, right?
That would be a huge experience, right? But just listening to the album of it, not so much fun. So Scorpions, I didn't really know until I saw the Moscow Music Peace Festival, whatever year that happened, and they were on the bill. I'm like, oh, I like some of these songs. And then with Rock You Like a Hurricane, and it was, I think Big City Nights was another single off of this one. That's how I taught myself how to play power chords on guitar when I was in university. Was I had Scorpions Best of Rockers and Ballads on CD, and my roommate had rented just a crappy like Strat and little practice amp or something, and then never used it. So I used it and I taught myself how to play Rock You Like a Hurricane and The Zoo and some of those other songs by playing along with Scorpions with the distortion turned up on this little practice amp. So it's a bit more sentimental for me because when I hear Rock You Like a Hurricane, which is just such a stupid song, but when I hear it, it reminds me of like university and Lethbridge, and I'm like teaching myself how to play guitar by playing along with the Scorpions. But yeah, as a even just by sort of reputation, like to have a hair metal bracket and not have the Crüe go through is probably wrong. So I'm fine with picking them, but it wasn't really my of the other winners that we've had so far. This is my least favorite of the bunch that's
fair
so far. Yeah.
All right. Let's look
Cool.
in the middle here. Now we're going to get into some interesting topics.
Yes. So
what do we got here? Probably Europe versus. Do we want to do Poison now?
We could do that one.
Or we could do Twisted Sister and Aerosmith, I think. One of those. Oh, no. Whitesnake, Slippery When Wet. Let's do Whitesnake.
Okay.
Because I
So
just listened
Slippery
to
When Wet was, Bon Jovi.
Go ahead, buddy. You
Slippery
go ahead
When
first,
Wet
Chris.
was seated 6th, and then Whitesnake was seated 11th, so fairly close. So we've got Bon Jovi's, not their first album, but their first album that really mattered with all the hits on it, versus Whitesnake when they hit popularity, right? I don't know, what do you say about Slippery When Wet, other than it's very pop, it's very shiny. I liked it at the time. I still didn't mind listening to it now. I kind of like Bon Jovi just because I lean more to the pop side than the heavy metal or side that you're lean to. But as far as the songs go, it's just sort of like it's pretty hard to discount just the number of hits that they wrote on that album. And plus they have a keyboard player, so there's that too.
Knew that was coming.
I had the same air band experience that you had with the girls, but in Wainwright High School or junior high at the time, it was the girls, they sang Living on a Prayer, and they wore spandex pants, and they started off with their backs to the audience, and so they were like wiggling their butts in time, like whoa, 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 whoa.
So you like, did your pecs?
This is amazing. So we had that experience. Yeah, it's not the hardest or the meanest of all the albums on here. It's no Appetite for Destruction by any means, but for classic songwriting and hit writing and everything else, it's huge, it's massive, and so I still don't mind listening to it. My kids like listening to the songs on this one, and
not Whitesnake.
they don't mind the one single off Whitesnake.
Here I go again.
They find the rest of it's a bit much, but they've heard Here I Go Again. So yeah, I guess as far as Whitesnake goes, lots of keyboards on that one too. I actually didn't mind listening to this one. What was the follow-up to this one? Was the tape? I had that tape too.
The one with Steve Vai on it.
That's all I remember. Steve Vai was on it.
I can't remember the name.
With Sailing Ships and
Sailing
stuff on
Ships
it.
was on there, which was a cool song at the time. I don't know if
I like that album a lot, so it was listenable. I don't mind listening to these ones. I'm not opposed to power ballads, so I didn't mind the Whitesnake one. I found the Whitesnake album, though, apart from the big hit single, a lot of the songs are kind of the same. They kind of hit the same notes, and there wasn't a lot of variety in them. So it was kind of like listening to an album of like this same kind of song over and over again. I found a bit,
Yeah.
but I still didn't mind it. But compared to Bon Jovi, in terms of just sheer songwriting craft and everything else, the Slippery When Wet album is just you know another level above in terms of being memorable and having an impact and all those kinds of things. So that one would
Yep.
definitely get my vote.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, both these albums I knew very well at that time. They're huge. I'll start with Whitesnake just because they're going to lose. They're one of those '70s leftover bands a little bit. David Coverdale is kind of, interesting guy. He's gone through all kinds of things. He's got the big voice to his credit, but
Mhm.
it has the huge hit. Here I Go Again is, I mean, arguably one of the great '80s rock songs. It is what it
Very
is.
80s. Yeah, totally.
There's an earlier version of it with another incarnation of Whitesnake that sounds like a sort of a '70s kind of thing, and so it's interesting to see how he knew there was a great song in there, and he cleaned it up '80s style with the synths and stuff, and with what's her name, Tana.
I don't remember.
What's
Yeah.
her name again? What's her name? Tana Katan or whatever her name is. Tana Katan, his wife at the time. Huge hit. I remember Still the Night as a kid. It's just sort of that Zeppelin kind of vibe, right? So I had lots of guitar work on there. Adrian Vandenberg was a great guitar player, and all that stuff worked really well. So I knew that album really well. I don't like to listen to all of it now. I find it's again a lot of it ends up sounding the same. Still the Night's a pretty good rock song. Holy dramatic bridge! It's over the top and crazy, but it's got the riffs and all that kind of stuff. And Here I Go Again is a legitimate big time rock song. So, and I still listen to that song. It does what it did to me in 1987, still does. So to his credit, it's a great song. But man, I listened to Slippery When Wet today, and I haven't listened to that whole album in probably 15 years. And to its credit, I went for a run today, and I listened to Slippery When Wet. I think I ran a little faster. I was getting wild in the streets, man.
Nice.
Like that album, there's not a bad track on it. Every song is, you're right, the songwriting is undeniable. It's weird. I think I had this epiphany as I was kind of running and I'm listening. I'm like, if you stripped away the synths a little bit and put some horns on this and cleaned up the guitar tones so they're a little more authentic, sort of '70s style, it's a Bruce Springsteen album. Like big, like nostalgic songs and fist pumping. It's us against the world. It's Born to Run kind of mentality in a lot of those songs. Like, and even the deep cuts. I was like, wow. The first track, Let It Rock, is sort of like your quintessential '80s rock song. But after that, man, even that late ballad, like I can't remember the name of it. It sounds like a Springsteen song. I couldn't believe it, and I'm a huge Springsteen guy. So maybe there's something in the water in New Jersey that they were. I think they were doing it on purpose. Actually, now that I listen to it through that lens.
Right.
But you start at the first track as sort of like a live song, and they probably opened concerts with it and gets everybody up and rocking out. But then it's just hit after hit after hit. It's a hit machine. Terrible band. Like the album title is awful, which is too bad now in retrospect. If they would have given it a little better name, that doesn't age well. But obviously you could love a bad name. Living on a Prayer is like a textbook in pop songwriting. Social Disease is probably the funnest song on the album. Like horns, It is the E Street Band on that one.
Yeah,
You just have this silly, fun rock song. Paging Dr. Bon Jovi and all these kind of tongue-in-cheek things, which I thought was fun. Wanted Dead or Alive is just a great acoustic. All the riffs work. It's got its thing. And then all those deep cuts like Raise Your Hands, Never Say Goodbye is the one I thought late. Like if Bruce Springsteen sang that song, no one would question it as a cheesy ballad. They would just be like, the boss means this, man. But that's the power of John Bon Jovi. He is a different gear, I think. He's just that much better at everything in this. He's like the Connor McDavid of hair metal, man. That guy just had it all figured out. He was skating faster than everybody else. I was shocked. I was like, I'm waiting for the filler. Like so many of these albums, you're like, oh, okay.
Does that mean Axl Rose is
track
the
7.
Axl Rose is the Austin Matthews of?
No, he's the Matthew Kachuk.
Ugh.
You love to hate him.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So no question. Every day of the week, Bon Jovi wins this,
Yeah.
and I think it might be in the final 4 for me. It's a pretty solid album. So go ahead, Jorg.
I listened to both of these back in the day. I remember being impressed with the Whitesnake album. I remember being impressed with how it kind of reminded me of Zeppelin. That was already my reference at the time.
Yep.
I was in the 80s. However old I wasn't. I was younger than 15, depending on what year it was. And I was already like, oh, it sounds like Zeppelin. Still of the Night reminded me of Zeppelin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's on purpose, right? It was meant to be an 80s version of...
Robert Plant always called him David cover version. That was his nickname for David Coverdale.
Yeah.
The rock ballad thing that Whitesnake does a lot of rock ballads, I find. Or what are we calling them? Power ballads. I got the
power ballads.
There's a story that I told you guys. I met a guy in Germany, and I was taught. His English was weak, and he said, "What kind of music you like?" "Oh, I like rock music." "Do you like rock ballads?" Like, "Oh, sometimes." "I like rock ballads." and somehow, when I think of that guy, I just assumed he meant Whitesnake. I don't know why. Whitesnake does a lot of them, but "Is This Love" is pretty good. Like it kind of if it's in the right moment, you can kind of feel it almost in the way that Sammy Hagar can make you feel a ballad.
He's a great singer. David Coverdale's a pretty good singer.
David Coverdale's a good singer. Yeah,
he's got the pipes.
Yeah, and I also had the Bon Jovi tape. When that came out, I don't remember what was the name of the heavy metal magazine that we used to buy.
Hit Parader or Circus?
One of those, yeah. I knew because they used to have like Bon Jovi's album is coming out. And I didn't really know who that was, but it seemed important, so I cut it out. and I that was my memory of that album. And then for me, it kind of faded in my life. It's not something that I really.
It's pretty poppy for you, Jorg. Knowing you, like it's pretty poppy for your taste, I would say.
But the Bruce Springsteen thing, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think Bruce Springsteen has said that he respects Bon Jovi's songwriting, hasn't he? So.
Yeah, I mean they're brothers in arms from New Jersey, right? So.
Yeah. But I guess I enjoyed more than anything listening to this was. I mean, I don't know if I can say more than anything. There was some great songwriting, but the Richie Sambora guitar playing there was really it was good. All of these albums, Wasp and Motley Crüe, and got Rat is that dun 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 dun. And this has some pretty tasty lead guitar and
he's solid.
Well, better than solid, and I'm kind of was surprised about that. Just felt pleasantly surprised. So, to me, it's the Bon Jovi album.
He served the song to Richie's credit. Like he didn't have to show off, extra scales and doing all these runs. Like he really served the song, I thought. So. Yeah. So I'm sure he's capable of doing all that other stuff, but he knows how to rein it in. So.
Yeah.
All right. Is that a slam dunk?
Is that 3 votes for Bon Jovi?
Pretty awesome. Yeah. That is. All right. What do we at here? I guess we're on to Poison. Right?
Poison versus... So Open Up and Stay Off versus Europe.
Okay. Can I start? I've been waiting all day to talk about Europe.
I'm waiting to hear how much...
Be right back.
You're disappointed.
This was honestly, this... I didn't... of course... I remember Europe. How can you... This song, to their credit, they wrote a catchy synth riff. I think that's about all I could ever say about this band. Like the little do-do-do is catchy as can be, and it'll live on in infamy. To their credit, it's never going to go away. We're going to get that the Final Countdown is such a weird song because like it's catchy and it builds this big chorus and the payoff totally works. Then you get the second verse, it's like they had nothing else to say. They're just like, then they're heading to Venus. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, it was either some deep metaphor for love and they picked a planet that was associated with that. But then by the end, I think they're actually just going to another planet. Like,
I think so. Yeah.
it's get the crisp bill, buddy. That I threw me. I just like I forgot how bad of a song outside of that riff it is. Like arrangement wise, it works. It builds to the chorus. I get it. It's a hit, and I remember it, and I could sing it to the day I die. So to their credit, that all works. But wow, I don't like that song. Then there's Rock the Night or whatever was the other single off there, which I forgot was their song. I heard. I'm like, okay, I know this song. I've heard this song. But man, that's their sexy song, right? To me, it sounded like heavy petting at summer camp versus Motley Crüe was like an orgy or something. You know, like they showed up to a different party with that song. Like it just didn't. I'm like, guys, like this isn't your thing. And then they start singing about native rights on the Cherokee Trail and stuff.
Yeah.
They're from Sweden. I was like, what are you doing? Did you read the encyclopedia and decided to just start spouting off things you don't know anything about? So it was not a good listen. I was eating breakfast with my son Thomas, and we were both swearing at it. Like he's like, "This sucks," and then I put on Poison's "Open Up and Say Ah," which just made the cut because that's an '88 album. So another one of those precursors of what came in the late '80s is definitely Poison. I went to that concert, so I probably have a little more nostalgia based on that. Poison sounds like a party. You know what I mean? Like it just the whole album. There's a lot of terrible songs on there. Nothing But a Good Time is, I think, probably everything Poison's about. And it's not their biggest hit. I think Talk Dirty to Me and Every Rose is probably their biggest hits of all time. But to me, that's always just like, there you go. You are nothing but a good time. Big, stupid rock riff. Tongue-in-cheek kind of lyrics. And I think that song really works. It still stands up. I can pump the fist to that. There's a lot of filler on this album as well. Lots of just bad sexual innuendos. But to their credit, I mean, the ballad works. I think there's some bands that did ballads better than others, and Bret Michaels knew how to pen a simple little cheesy ballad. And Every Rose Has Its Thorn. It's fun. I still play it around campfires for people, and it always gets the middle-aged ladies rocking. They love that song, so it works. Fallen Angel was the other single, and I always thought that was a pretty good song. As far as their songwriting craft goes, it's a pretty well-crafted song, and it totally worked. Then they have the Loggins Messina cover at the end, which I loved that song when I was a kid. It was one of the singles as well, so I remember that. So I think in the spirit of 80s metal, Poison and just embodies all of it, the good and the bad. And yeah, I went and saw them just a couple years ago. Def Leppard came through town with them and Tesla opening, and I'm a geek, so I went for Tesla, and they let them play for 15 minutes. Poison did a 45-minute set, and I realized they only have about 4 songs people actually know, and they know how to milk them through even such a short set. And then when you compared them to Def Leppard, it was like, whoa, they paled in comparison. But they did the thing, and they were a big, stupid rock band, and it worked for its time. So I'll go Poison all the way in this one.
Well, that's a shock.
Yeah. Sorry for saying heavy petting at summer camp. That came out wrong. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah, so Europe, I guess it's like the Oscar Clefbaum of rock bands. Like it's just coming from a completely different place than a lot of the other stuff on the list, which is one of the reasons why I liked them at the time. I didn't have this tape. I had the 2 tapes after this. So going back and listening to this one was kind of fun because I didn't have this album when it came out, even though it was so heavily synth laden for whatever. Like I was like, when the follow up to this one came out, I was like, I'm gonna get that one because there's that synth on it or whatever. And Joey Tempest is a legit singer, like he can really sing. So Yeah, I enjoyed it probably more than either of you, I'm guessing. Partially because I like the pop, and I remember at the time really liking any kind of band that could legit have loud guitars and loud keyboards in the same band. It didn't have to be one or the other. It didn't have to be like there's only synths and you bury the guitars somewhere, or you put the guitars out front and you bury the keyboards or don't have any. They were making
Yeah.
legit effort to have like they're both up front in the mix and they're both part of the songwriting that they did. So, you know, I like that part of it. And then the awfulness of the lyrics almost gets a pass for me because they're writing in a second language. Where, when we get to Kiss or even with Poison in this round, is like, yeah, you were born and raised speaking English and writing English, and those are the lyrics you wrote. But this is just second language for you, and you're writing.
Yeah,
like,
it's like
I
the
can't write a
ESL
song in
kids in my
Swedish.
class that write better.
You know, I can't write a song in a foreign language, and have it make much sense. They wrote a song in English; it makes no sense. But of all of the singles out of this whole list, this is the only one really that really resonates with my kids, especially my son. It's still a thing now. The kids in his class love this song.
Yeah, it had a hit. There's no question about that.
And when you go, like, I have a YouTube playlist of like the biggest single off of each of these albums that I'm going to post later. But this, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe it's the synth riff or something like that, but the views that the Final Countdown has on YouTube is like more views than all the other videos put together. Like, I think it's almost like 900 million views that video is at. It's ridiculous, right? So
it is a phenomenon.
It's sort of transcended that time and era and everything else to be like this thing, and there's something to that, or that just doesn't happen for no reason.
Yeah,
it's a catchy.
The song works.
The song works really well,
but it just, I don't know.
I would rather listen to this song than some of the other ones I've heard, but I really like the Poison album too. So compared to some of the other ones, I'd rather listen to the Europe one. The Poison album, I loved at the time. I had the tape. It was, I probably have really fond memories, or I look at it favorably because I have such good nostalgic memories about this album. Even the album tracks, I really, really liked it. Going back and listening to it now, it sounds really thin. Like it's just it's a plain, thin kind of album for the most part, other than the singles. Like Fallen Angels, awesome song. Nothing But a Good Time is a ridiculously stupid song, but it's really fun. So I love that song. So I like listening to that album, but I mainly enjoyed listening to it because of like good memories I had listening to that in my truck in Wainwright, more than like how good this album is on its own. But
great album cover though, eh?
It's one of the worst.
Well, they're both
terrible album cover. Terrible.
Both of them are pretty sad.
So, I'm guessing this is going to get overvoted. I would vote for Europe, but I'm not devastated if Poison wins, just because I also I like both of these albums. So.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well,
you're right about
the band group should win.
Final Countdown is a phenomenon. You can't take that away from them.
Yeah.
Jorg, what do you got?
Tiebreaker,
break the tie, Jorg.
There hasn't been a moment when that song hasn't been in my head today, the Final Countdown. I just, while the kids were coming in my classroom, should I say that here? My daytime
when you were marking,
I teach high school. I had the Final Countdown playing just just wanted to see what they would react. And kids said, "Oh, that's the intro song my dad uses for his magic show." So it just seemed perfect.
Only at VidConf you got
Yeah.
Penn and Teller. They send their kids there.
It's a pretty awesome building intro for
Yeah.
something like that, for sure.
Oh yeah.
And
they're heading to Venus.
Mars too, right? But so that song, I mean, I remember it from junior high dances. It was super familiar in a lot of ways. I never listened to this. Had you heard this album before this week? Because I hadn't.
Not the whole one. I knew the two
And,
songs, the two singles. That's it.
Well, Carrie is on here too, right?
Yeah.
That was a big hit. I'd forgotten about that. I
Oh yeah.
probably never put it together that was the same band. Outside of the hits, there was a lot of musicianship that I was hearing, more in a like clean 80s style, Deep Purple kind of way. There's a Hammond organ in there somewhere,
Yeah.
or and a lot of DS7 sounds too. At any rate, so I was kind of like, this is, in some ways, this is better than I thought. But I don't know, Jeff, you said something. You made some comparison. I forget what it was, but it was like listening to really. Well, you made the Connor McDavid joke earlier.
About John Bon, yeah.
It was like listening to Connor McDavid talk. It was.
Ouch.
Yeah,
was
sure.
It was like really, really talented musicians, but almost no personality.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted, and I'm kind of have a Northern European bias sometimes. I really wanted this to be better than the Poison album, and the Poison album was, to me, just so dumb. But I think Jeff said it really well. It's nothing but a good time is that's what Poison is. They're the good time boys, and the ultimately the thing, like, and I don't think Poison has the musicianship either that
Oh yeah.
that Europe has. Not the singer, not the rest of the band members. It's not even comparable. But
They're Van Halen, and all of them are as talented as David Lee Roth. Like,
it's almost
the whole band.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost unjust, but because also, I mean, the recording, I agree with Chris. It's got a thin kind of sound, and I think they just stepped backwards into, I don't know. Like, I don't think they're a good band, Poison. But this album has that pixie juice that the Europe album does not. I don't know. Like, you can party to it. I have a hard time imagining partying to the Europe album. So
Yeah.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah.
So make the call, Jorg. It's on you, buddy.
I would love to just say Europe, but I don't think it's probably the Poison album. Yeah.
Europe's the ABBA of hair metal, man. Like, you can't
Yeah.
give it to them. They're not nearly as good as ABBA, actually. ABBA's
Probably
better, but-
laughing all the way to the bank.
Oh,
That one.
well, they're living off. Can you imagine that song alone? Yeah.
That song.
All right.
Okay, well, if the first rounders, we still got
We got two more here, I think, right?
we got Aerosmith, Permanent Vacation.
Let's do Twisted Sister and Aerosmith. We'll save
Yeah.
because I think 9 and 8 will be the biggest argument here, actually. Well, I say that, but I don't know.
I don't know.
Both
But yeah,
these could
so
be. Let's go Permanent
Aerosmith,
Vacation.
Permanent
Stay Hungry.
Vacation was number 7. Twisted Sister, Stay Hungry was number 10. So
All right.
yeah,
Jorg, you want to start? I know you
I'm gonna
finished, but
I'm gonna talk about Twisted Sister.
let's do it. JJ French or
I have.
what do you want to
hidden
do with your life?
Davey
Jorg?
Animal Mendoza? Who do you want to talk about? Bring it on.
I have
AJ
hidden this
Pro.
from the world for a
AJ
long
Pro.
time, but Twisted Sister was my gateway to heavy metal. It's only
For
two
sure.
moves from Stay Hungry to Master of Puppets. So
It's true. But that was early. Like, this is an early album, so
yeah, like 83, is that right? It doesn't sound great. Like sonically, it's kind of it's like that Motley Crüe album or the Wasp one. It's kind of, I find the sound is a bit rough. Like but I don't know. I love, it's got personality for what it's worth. D Snyder's lyrics, maybe I'm not putting him beside Bon Jovi in this list, but he's got a cleverness that, let's say, Bon Scott had.
Yeah.
Kind of a little stupid, but he could turn a phrase. I appreciated that. But having a song called "It's the Nature of the Beast" is maybe a little weak. But I remember really not sure what SMF was at the time, and thought it must be pretty cool though.
Mm-hmm. My son asked me what SMF meant, and I'm like, never mind. Eat your toast.
Just play it loud, mother. Yeah, and you know what? For a power ballad, I think I like the price. I'm old enough to say that I like the price. But they're really defensive if you ever listen to them talk about their musicianship, but I don't think they're super musicians. At least it doesn't come across in this. Whereas Aerosmith, they really are. I mean, at least as a rock and roll band, that's a good rock and roll band. Permanent Vacation to me is spotty. It's really good, and it's also really not good. Ragdoll, again, problematic song, but Dude Looks Like a Lady is, really funky. But yeah, there's some tracks on here too, though, that are kind of, to me, like they're there with Whitesnake, aren't they, with their power ballads? So,
Angel.
Really,
Steven Tyler loves the power ballads for sure.
Yeah,
and always did.
Yeah, Angel is on this one.
Might have invented them.
And they sure did cash in on their power ballads going after that, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This may be their best power ballad. I think they got progressively worse in my mind as their career went on. I might like this album better than Pump, Permanent Vacation. No?
That's up to you, man. I'm gonna.
Yeah. Well, we're not.
I'm with you. I'm with
Pump
you, Jorg, on that
Pump
one.
isn't on this list.
It's 89, I think. So.
Yep.
But I haven't chosen an album on this bracket. I think I'm going with Twisted Sister.
I'm proud of you.
My story is whatever year it was, I was far too young to be at this concert. Twisted Sister was coming to town. That was what I thought was happening. And I begged my dad to take me, and it was in wintertime, so he took me for my birthday. And what it was is they were opening up for Iron Maiden on the Power Slave tour. And so I saw Twisted Sister and the Power Slave tour.
You had to do it again, Jorg. Come on, stop it, man.
It's like 10 or 11, so yeah.
My dad was not taking me to Power Slave tour at that point. I'll tell you that one. He'd barely take me to hockey practice, Jorg.
It's the price we got to pay.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I'm gonna jump in.
Yep.
Just because I think Twisted Sister's more down our alley than Chris's probably. I'll jump on your story. Twisted Sister, we had this on vinyl. My brother Dave owned this one. He loved I Wanna Rock. And, sometimes I still just kind of want to rock. I'm not going to lie. That song still gets me going. Even though, we're not going to take it's the big hit on here, and I get it, and it gets the fist pumping. I Wanna Rock's my favorite song on this album. I love that song. It just gets me going every time. So, which is awesome. I owned probably 3 Twisted, and I think the same way. That's one of those early bands I could connect with because they were fun and stupid and big, and the videos of the time. And Dee Snider was just so over the top. So I had Can't Stop Rock and Roll on tape. Yeah. We had there was one. We had an LP. Oh, what album? Come Out and Play, it was called, and the cover was a manhole cover with the classic Twisted Sister insignia on it. and if it was perforated, so if you popped all the things, you could pull it, and Dee Snider would emerge from the manhole with a bone. Like, I didn't even need to hear the album at that point. I mean, that was amazing. So Twisted Sister is its own thing. Then I watched way too many rock docs, so I watched the Twisted Sister one that was on Netflix, and I fell in love with them all over again because they paid a price. That song was not kidding around. They meant it, and they finally got their big hit, and they made their money, and the rest is sort of history with those guys. And it's funny that you went to that concert because my parents went out to probably the keg one night and drank too much white wine, and they hired a really cool teenage rock chick to come and babysit us. And she was telling us the night before, she's like, I saw the greatest show ever last night. And it was Twisted Sister and Iron Man. And I was like, I was in love, man. So all that stuff means a lot to me, and I will always hold Twisted Sister dear to my heart. This is a tough bracket for me because I am a huge Aerosmith guy. Joe Perry is one of my favorite guitar players of all time. Of all their albums, I find it's funny that you say there's hits and misses because this is the album where they're getting the band back together, right? There's the highlight of the 70s stuff. And I love the Get Your Wings album, and I love Toys in the Attic, and you listen to these and Rocks and different things, and sort of that classic 70s FM radio rock band that they were, and all the big hits. And then they sort of devolved and disintegrated, and the drug issues and stuff that hit them. Joe Perry left the band for a while. They have an album with some other guitar players on it. Night in the Ruts, if you can figure out the right in the nuts joke. And then, not all that was great. Done with Mirrors and all these kind of things. I was grade 7, and I still remember a girl had an Aerosmith pick from the concert because she went to, and I didn't really know who that band was. I was like, but it meant something to her. Like, I saw Joe Perry and Steven Tyler last night. I was like, oh, okay, whatever that is. And then I started hearing the songs, and there's huge hits on this album, to their credit. They tried to, we're going to get a couple of these bands, those 70s bands that try to repackage themselves as these 80s bands. Kiss will fall into this category as well. And I guess Van Halen to a certain extent, but they did a pretty good job of it. This is the start of that next peak in their career. You guys made fun of Pump, but I actually really love the Pump album. I think that is their masterpiece of this era. Like, I could still listen to every track on Pump. I love it. It's a pretty solid album. This one, it's hit and miss, but the hits are great. There's some bluesier pieces in there, like St. John. I love that song. It's just so goofy, kind of Steven Tyler being funny. It does have like the I'm Down Beatles cover, which is probably a little tacked on and unnecessary. But there's some pretty Hangman Jury and all these kind of slide guitar stuff, and that's just Joe Perry being Joe Perry. Yeah, dude, looks like a lady has not aged well.
No,
but it's too bad because it is such a great rock song. But it's just like, okay, yeah, I don't know if you'd release that as a single nowadays, but at the time it was just like, whatever, it was what it was. Big ballad, obviously. Angels is huge ballad. I've always, to this day, I don't know what the guitar tone is in the guitar solo. It's one of my favorite Joe Perry guitar solos. He cleaned up the tone. He kind of thickened it up with, I don't know what it is. Like, as a kid, it just always kind of shocked me because I expected, step on the overdrive pedal and knock your socks off guitar solo. And then there's Joe Perry doing this beautiful, soulful, bluesy kind of solo in there. So I love Joe Perry a lot. So I'm really torn on this one because I love both these bands in their own way. The band that meant the most to me overall, as far as my musicianship goes and who I'd want to emulate, would be Joe Perry. But I love Twisted Sister for just being a big, stupid thing that is called Twisted Sister with these hair and all the tassels and the bone and the manhole and all that kind of stuff. So honestly, in the spirit of this, even though I would listen to Aerosmith more often, I'm going to actually vote Twisted Sister because I think of that era. They are more of that era and just fit the vibe of that. I think Aerosmith is a better band overall without question. But their better days were behind them and ahead of them as far as this album went. So I'm going to go with Stay Hungry.
Be the hunter and the hunted.
There you go.
There
That's
you
the
go.
price I got to pay. I know what Chris is going to vote, so here we go.
Do you? Oh, maybe.
Well, I never know. He probably thought I was going Aerosmith all the way. So
I wouldn't say I'm making fun of Pump. I liked Pump a lot. And it's probably a better album than Permanent Vacation, but I like Permanent Vacation. I enjoy it more than listening to Pump. Pump sounds, if Permanent Vacation is Pyromania, then Pump is Hysteria.
yeah, that's fair.
And I actually like Hysteria more than Pyromania, but I think Pyromania is the better album. And I just love listening to Permanent Vacation more than Pump because it's not quite so perfect. It's got some rougher edges. I don't know. There's just something about at the time. So I think I was in grade 9 when they came out, 9 or 10, and I had the tape. And there's just something about listening to the whole tape all the way through. So you have like Heart's Done Time and Magic Touch and Ragdoll.
Yeah, the drums and Ragdoll are nuts.
On the second side, there's like St. John, Be Cool, and the Hangman Jury and Permanent Vacation and stuff. It's just I could listen to that over and over and over again, right? So, and I also remember thinking again because I like the balance of like there's guitar and synth. I like the movie, the instrumental at the very end because I like this doesn't really fit with this album, but I would like to hear some band do some album of just like these kind of instrumental stuff. And then later on I got into Pink Floyd and it was kind of like listening to the movie but better and with real songs and stuff like that. But that's how I ended up getting into listening to Pink Floyd was actually from listening to the movie, which is like the tag at the end of this thing, which is doesn't really sound like them at all, but you can kind of hear it if you listen to it, like 80s Pink Floyd with the movie. So this was one of the big albums for me when I was in junior high, and I loved it. The Twisted Sister one, like they played the video on video hits like every day, every week.
Yeah.
That was a monster hit at the time. It's one of the iconic ones of the 80s. I loved I Wanna Rock too, even though it was essentially when you watch the video,
it's the same
template.
Yeah.
Same
principle.
Same everything. Just different song that it segues into. And then I recognized the third song from the Pee Wee Herman movie because I don't know if you remember Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but at the very end,
you're gonna burn in hell.
Yeah, burn in hell. Wait, guys,
I should have brought a bow.
Weren't they in the movie singing "You Can't Stop Rock and Roll" in the movie itself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Which you can't, you know.
Yeah.
Can't stop. Can't you stop it?
You just can't.
Had that on tape.
With the whole album as a piece, though, like without that emotional, nostalgic attachment to like what it meant and stuff like that, and just listening to as a piece of art, doesn't hold up for me the way it does for you. The way that I have that attachment to Permanent Vacation for the same kind
that's
of
fair.
reasons, right? So going back and listening to, like, I just hear a bunch of fairly thinly recorded, kind of bland sounding other songs, and then these gigantic hits that are like the fist pumping. Like these are the iconic of all the hair band songs of the 80s. These are probably like this was the genesis of a lot of that, right? So
yeah, for sure.
I give full credit to Twisted Sister, and I'm not opposed to picking them to go on further just because of the iconic status that they have. But
you've already lost.
I don't know if I will go back and listen to that album ever again, but I go back and listen to Permanent Vacation quite often and listen to it. So yeah.
And I'm in the same boat. If I'm gonna listen to something, I would probably listen to Aerosmith. but I just think there's something so special about who Twisted Sister was in 1984.
Yeah.
You kind of had to live that era to get it, but
And never came back.
Yeah.
That was.
yeah. And in the We're Not Gonna Take It video, there's a Wayne Gretzky poster behind the kid's shoulder,
Yes.
and that always
Yep.
meant something to him. So
Plus, there was all his like standing up against censorship,
The PMRC and all that stuff,
like
yeah.
all that stuff.
yeah, if you ever get a
I-
just go see the YouTube clip of him calling out Tipper Gore, and that's pretty
Yeah.
classic. So
So that is amazing, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I loved him for that.
Yeah.
If
if this was a
as,
70s rock album thing, I'd probably argue for Aerosmith more because I am a huge Aerosmith guy. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, can we
Yeah.
agree?
I'm
We'll let
okay with
D and the boys.
let D give him a pass on this.
Give them give them a break. They've had a hard time.
It's a tough bracket. It's a tough bracket. I love both those bands. So
Well, speaking
Okay,
of tough
we only got one
brackets, so we've got
I knew that. I thought we'd save this one for the end because this is going to be the biggest argument. And this is
Animalize, Kiss.
I'm going to let Chris
Number
start.
8.
I'm curious.
And number 9, Long Cold Winter, Cinderella.
I have a feel. I know damn well what you're going to pick, Chris. So bring it on, punk. Because I love both these bands. So.
You probably know which one I'm going to pick, but this ended up being closer than I thought it was going to be. Just because I remember I had borrowed this tape. I didn't buy it, but I borrowed it back in the day because I used to DJ junior high dances, and so I wanted that song as one of the ones that I would DJ with. And so I listened to the rest of the album at the time, and I remember thinking, well, none of this album is as good as that song. So, like, they should have just, like, if they had a whole album of Heads on Fire, this would have been an amazing album. And it wasn't, so then I was disappointed. But going back and listening to it, and I know I'm also not, like, Kiss to me is not like what it is for you guys. That was probably more, again, like Def Leppard or Van Halen for me. But I was pleasantly surprised, or I was like impressed by like how much I enjoyed just listening to this album overall. Like I really liked it. Maybe it just sounds better now than it did on that crappy cassette or something. But like and especially compared to some of the other albums that were plowing through to choose winners and losers and stuff. Like, I really enjoyed this album. I would probably go back and listen to it again in a heartbeat. I really enjoyed it.
There you go. Nice.
But
But
I still enjoy Cinderella more from being in a band and from being a songwriter and having an album that sort of transcends even just being a hair band to like something that some of the songs on that Long Cold Winter album could have been recorded 5 years ago and still sound like they do. The only thing that really sets it apart or dates it is his singing style, essentially. If you didn't like the whole time, this could be a bluesy rocker kind of album that could have been put out on Stony Plain Records or something. Like it's that kind of band and that kind of album. And I remember thinking that at the time of like, their hair is huge and he sings like AC/DC, but the songs themselves and a lot of the guitar parts and stuff in it are like, they're not a Poison and they're not a Motley Crüe. They're something
way better. Yeah.
Way different, much bluesier, much tastier. The songs are interesting. There's different layers to things. The way that they arrange things in their songs is just really impressive. And when I went back and listened to it, I kind of had the same impression. I'm like, yeah, no, what I remember about this album was it's as good as I remember it being when I used to, listen to it all the time, kind of a thing. So, the Kiss album, thumbs up. I liked it a lot more than I was anticipating liking it. It's still no Crazy Crazy Nights, but it's still pretty good.
It's so much better.
No. Yeah, I liked it a lot more. I would go back and listen to that album anytime. So that was a good revelation for me, I guess, instead of just writing it off as this was a one-hit album and a bunch of crap. I liked the whole album, but I still like overall the musicianship and the style and the songwriting and stuff, and just the vibe of Long Cold Winter over Animalize. So I would vote for Cinderella.
I think Jeff is going to have the most to say, so I'll just say my.
Bring it on, Jorg. Yep.
I'll just say my 2 cents or whatever, the sum will end up being. So I didn't have well, that's not quite true. I just went in assuming that I'd like the Cinderella album better. I know that they're kind of a blues rock band more than anything. Yeah, might be a little bit of my own kind of listening habits lately. I know I've sort of kind of rejected the blues rock thing just because it's sort of really something that I'm really comfortable with. That's home to me more than anything. And I'm just as a listener, I'm just trying to not do that all the time. And you know, and they could have been the Black Rose in some ways, or you know, pick a band, right? Not as good as you know, the Stones at their best. Better than the Stones at their worst.
That's a good comment. Yeah.
But what stuck out, I think, was not just the vocal. That's obvious, but the guitar playing as well was like a poor man's AC/DC. I thought, I just figured, oh, Zeppelin, Stones, this is what I'm going to hear. And what I heard was AC/DC, just all the way through. Maybe not so much with like the slide playing and more blues elements or blues rock. You know, AC/DC doesn't really do that. But the way that AC/DC plays those chunky rhythms and then has really tight rhythms too. Cinderella was doing that, I think, on this album. So, and then of course, you know, there's the ballad on there, which to me, I didn't like because of the vocal. I'm like, it's just kind of not the right voice.
Some cringe.
So there's some cringiness. And everything about it was different than I think all of these other albums in certain like sonic ways. Like the voice is obvious, but it's also really like in front in the mix, right? It's like it's not as though you're straining to hear the voice. It's definitely there. And the guitar too is really forward in the mix. But I noticed that about especially the lead. It's like lead and lead vocal were competing for the same volume, right? And I'm just because I'm a guitar nerd, you know, all of these bands, not Guns N' Roses, but the rest of them, were having like, or all sort of Eddie Van Halen clones, and this one isn't. So that stuck out too, right? Really pentatonic heavy, and yeah, so it was cool. And then Animalize, I liked as a kid, and so I wasn't sure, and I put it on, and it's kind of cool. I like the vocal harmonies. And this is just a function of listening to any Kiss album. I like hearing more than one voice, more than one lead singer. There's some. I think you'll forgive me, Jeff. There's some cheese on there.
What?
Burn, bitch, burn. I don't know, maybe because I didn't give it more than one listen, but it felt like it was falling apart, and I was like, how could that happen on a studio recording? But
third track, they're always like,
But I was also kind of like, but it's cool. Like, it's got much more of a strut to it than the Cinderella album. Yeah.
Isn't that the one that says I want to put my log in your fireplace? Is that song?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's Gene. Come on, kids.
Their English is a first language, right? And that's what they're saying. Yeah.
I know, and yeah, that's probably not even the worst offense.
They were only
but
6
that
years
one stuck
away from
out.
let's put the X in sex, guys. Like this
Yeah.
is that era, right?
And then it's interesting that I also think it's that this Cinderella album was really thick and big sounding, and the Animalize was thin. And I thought the vocal harmonies helps it a lot with Kiss because I happen to like how they harmonize with each other. But I mean, they had that lead guitar player that didn't end up touring with them, and I don't know, it just sounds not quite there. But still, I was kind of like, I still wanted to give it to Kiss because it's just, I wanted to put it on and strut. Well, I think
they got some swagger, man.
I think the Cinderella is probably the better album here. So,
what's your pick then?
I'm picking Long Cold Winter.
Long Cold Winter. All right.
Yeah.
So it's been decided then, I guess, but I'll talk. This is the hardest bracket for me because I only play guitar and sing because of the influence of Kiss. As a kid, they were my comic book superheroes and my rock stars and my religion and all the rest of it. So, but I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, so I was introduced to it late. One of those bands, just fascinated by the imagery of it all the time. I grew up, there was a kid across the street, Derek Plain, who was a friend of my brother's, had every Kiss album on LPs, hung up on his walls like they were artwork, and we'd sit around and listen to all this stuff, and I just thought they were my Beatles, like they really were. And it's funny when you listen to Gene when he put the band together, and you talked about the multiple vocals. They tried. I mean, he's a very business-minded guy, so we're gonna have two. I'll be John, and Paul will be Paul, I guess, and Ace, I guess, is George Harrison, and let Peter Criss be Ringo in the back, and they pieced it together that way. And so I've always, it is that thing. That's what they tried to do. The huge 70s albums, obviously, and then much like Aerosmith, crumbled to pieces with The Elder and Unmasked and the disco era and all these types of things that came, and then resurrected themselves. So Animalize is a weird album because it's in the middle of their resurrection. They stripped off the makeup with the Lick It Up album. Vinnie Vincent, they brought in this new guitar player to replace. It's funny because Creatures of the Night's actually a pretty good album if you go back and listen to Creatures. Ace doesn't really play on that album. He's on the cover out of like some contractual obligation, but Vinnie Vincent did most of that stuff, and then he wrote the Lick It Up album with Paul for the most part. And Lick It Up's a really good album. It could have easily just as replaced Animalize on here. But I didn't. Lick It Up didn't mean anything to me when I was a kid because I was too young to get it. I didn't understand. Animalize is the album where I was like, okay, here we go. And same thing. Paul doing his vocal warm up at the beginning, and Heaven's on Fire, and that whole thing. Like that was the vibe, right? And I was rebaptized. Like here we are. This is the greatest rock band that ever lived. So I had a very close connection to this album. I had to order it. It's kind of funny when you think about the way Spotify and Apple Music and all these services are now. I had to go down to the Smarty Mart in Spruce Grove and go through a catalog, and get the actual number and take it up to the front on a little piece of paper, like I was going out of the card catalog of the library or something. And they ordered it, and it showed up 3 weeks later, kind of thing. And I went down with my dad, and we picked up Animalize, and I was like, yes. And then my dad's like, let's put this in the tape deck, Jeffrey. And I'm like, oh no, don't do it, Bob. And so I lived about a 10-minute drive from the Smarty Mart, and I was like, it's funny you brought up Burn Bitch Burn, because I'm like, please don't get to Burn Bitch Burn, Dad. I didn't know how I was going to live with that if we got to that song. I don't even remember if we did or not. So this song is iconic. That whole album is iconic in that way. I started playing guitar around this time, so I distinctly remember me and my good buddy Kurt Woolard air banding to. He had a live VHS. They released I found it on YouTube just a few weeks ago. There's a VHS live show they released this time, and if you watch the Thrills in the Night video, it's straight from that. It's just live stock footage from that. And we air banded this a million times on sleepovers in Grove Meadows. So this album is all of that for me. So you get that, Kiss became a hair band, right? Lick It Up isn't really like they don't look like a hair band quite yet, a little bit, I guess. This is a hair band. And
Yeah.
then Asylum followed this, and they're like, woo, full on Theater of Pain, Motley Crüe hair band look. Like, yes, lots of airbrush. And then probably the album, and Chris brought it up earlier, Crazy Nights was like, I just thought the greatest song ever written. And I can't listen to that album now. It's pretty bad. Like, I really honestly can't listen to it. But that's the first concert I ever went to, was the Crazy Nights tour, 1987. Anthrax open, which is funny. I'd probably listen to the Anthrax album now more than that. But, change your life kind of moments for sure. Gene and Paul were live, saw the whole thing. A few years ago, Kiss was coming through town. I'd never seen them with makeup on, and my kids were of that age, so I took my kids to their first concert, and their first was Kiss as well, and we got the full-on 75-year-old strut up there. Gene should retire the big projection screens because it's not that flattering anymore, but it was a lot of fun. So Kiss is always going to be near and dear to my heart. As an album, it's pretty solid. If you've ever know the history of Gene and Paul, Gene had very little to do with the band at this time, so it's no shock that all the great songs are Paul songs. But he knew Gene was still a big signature of this band, and he had to let him have his songs. There's name a Gene song on this album, like honestly,
weak,
other
right?
than they're weak,
Yeah.
they're not that strong. So when you look at the hits, the opening track, Into the Fire, I've Had Enough, is just a big silly rock song to start the album. Followed up with the single, right, Heaven's on Fire. A couple Gene songs in there. Lonely as the Hunter is not a bad Gene song, I guess, but Thrills of the Night's a really good song, actually. It's one of my favorite 80s era sort of Kiss songs. It's a really strong song. So this album will always be near and dear to me. I can still listen to it. Of that era, I'd probably listen to the Lick It Up album. It's just one of those things. I think it's a stronger album overall. So Cinderella, another, it's one of those bands you're almost embarrassed to admit that you like, because the name is a little hair metal, the look was a little hair metal, the whole vibe, they encapsulate that. They were a later band, right? They came along. They were the next wave after the Twisted Sisters and the Iron Maidens of the world. Their first album had a couple of real, kind of heavy rock, almost sounds like Rat, but a little bit better kind of tracks. And then Long Cold Winter came out, and I think this is really who Tom Kiefer is as a songwriter. Just more bluesy, as Jorg said. He's a blues rock dude. I got this tape for Christmas when I was in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, my grandma's house, and I didn't listen to a thing my family said for about 3 weeks because I had my headphones on the entire time and listened to this to death. So I know it very well. Gypsy Road's still one of my favorite rock songs. Put it up with any other band. I think it's just a great rock song. I love that song. The voice takes some getting used to if you're not used to it, because it can be laughable. So the thing with Cinderella, there's that element where some people will just be like, what the hell is that? And they would always want to take it a little further. The end of the track, that first one, falling apart at the seams, the song ends and you think, oh, it's a good rock song. And then, nope, let's do a reprise. And he's like, wow, 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 doing all it, like he thinks he's James Brown or something. Like, it's just like, come on, man. Too much. But I do love this album, and I still actually choose to listen to it. So that says a lot when you still actually, it's not out of nostalgia. I just love a few of the songs in it. They're great songs. And it's beyond that. Last Mile is a great song. It obviously had the two big hits. Gypsy Road was the lead single, and then Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone, which is the ballad. And it is full of cringe factor, but and take a cliche and make it your chorus, right? But to me, it just rings. Maybe it's just nostalgia. I don't hate that song because it is what it is. It made me want to learn piano when I was a kid. Then I cut my finger off, so that wasn't a dream that ever happened. But so to choose an album for me to go against Kiss is tough. I think the Cinderella album is the stronger album. And it's already been decided. So if I had to listen to an album tomorrow, I would put on the Long Cold Winter album. So I guess that's all you need to know. So I'm I'm fine with the choice. I could go either way with this one, honestly. So, yep, give it to Cinderella. So
I thought that was the one that would be controversial.
I should have gone. We should have planned this so we knew. If this was wrestling, we would have all played this out before, so we knew how to keep it exciting. But
So this video is 2 hours long, and we got through the first bracket.
Yep.
no one's
Also,
listening
this
at
is-
this point. So
This is also as controversial as we get
Yeah.
with anything.
Yeah.
no.
Should I
Yeah.
pause the recording or?
Well, it's just if you actually listen to all this, thank you very much for sticking around.
Yeah.
Just celebrate your youth. Don't be embarrassed by your guilty pleasures, and enjoy this stuff. Because Nirvana came along and squashed all this and made us all feel bad about it. But there's nothing wrong with it. So.
Yep.